The war was supposed to end with victory, not with a gift that felt like a punishment. When Captain Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle, he expected medals, paperwork, maybe a quiet apartment where he could finally breathe again. He did not expect a pale blue alien girl waiting for him, silent, trembling, and legally labeled as his property. But as Jake stared in her dark, uncertain eyes, he realized something no one else had noticed. She wasn't a reward. She was a warning. And the galaxy was hiding a nightmare far bigger than any war he'd survived. If stories like this pull you in, don't forget to hit like so more people can find it. And hey, if you enjoy deep HFY moments and galaxy-changing twists, consider subscribing. It helps the channel grow. It means I can keep bringing you more stories just like this. All right, let's get into it. The transport shuttle hit the landing pad with a dull metallic thud, the kind that vibrated through your boots and told you the pilot was either exhausted, fed up with life, or both. After 5 years of galactic war, Jake Morrison couldn't blame him. Everyone was tired. Everyone carried their own invisible debris. Jake stepped into the sunlight, blinking like someone who hadn't seen a real star in years. Maybe he hadn't. Hard to remember after so many nights hiding in trenches and ruined cities on planets that didn't even have names, just grid coordinates. After the formal debriefing and the endless silence that followed the ceasefire, he expected a slow reintegration. Some grief counseling, maybe a medal he wouldn't care about. What he didn't expect was the young officer waiting for him at the gate, clutching her tablet like it might explode. "Captain Morrison?" she asked. "Yeah," Jake said, adjusting the strap of his bag. She swallowed hard, tapping her screen. "Sir, you're assigned to Building 7. Immediately. Building 7. The one with extra security and thick curtains across the windows. The one soldiers whispered about in hallways." Jake frowned. "What?" Her expression tightened. "There's something waiting for you. Something. Not someone. Not a debrief or an award. Something." Jake felt a cold thread of unease crawl into his stomach, but he nodded and kept walking. Maybe it was equipment he left behind. Maybe it was some bureaucratic nightmare. Anything was better than the rumors. But the moment he stepped inside Building 7, he knew the truth. A man in a coalition uniform sat behind a metal desk, stiff as steel. And behind him, standing perfectly still, was a girl. Except she wasn't human. Her skin was a pale, shimmering blue, marked with thin silver lines that curled along her arms. Her eyes were entirely black, like deep water with no bottom. She wore a simple gray dress and stared at the floor as if afraid to take up space. "Captain Morrison," the man said without looking up. "I'm Commander Hayes. I'll make this quick. This Velcari female has been assigned to you as part of the Critian reparations agreement." Jake blinked. "Assigned? What does that mean?" Hayes slid a tablet across the table. "She is yours. Registered under your name. Her designation is Liria." Jake went cold. Completely cold. "This is slavery," he said quietly. Hayes sighed, the tired kind, the kind that meant he'd had this conversation too many times. "Critian custom. Fully legal under treaty terms. If you refuse, she'll be reassigned back into Critian custody." Jake understood exactly what that meant. And judging by the slight tremor in the girl's, Liria's, hands, she understood too. Something ugly twisted in Jake's chest. He hated the war. He hated the Critians. But this felt worse. He stared at her, small, silent, clearly terrified, and realized he was cornered. Refusing meant condemning her. Accepting meant endorsing something he despised. He signed a tablet. Hayes exhaled in relief. She understands basic English. The compliance implant ensures obedience. "Good luck, Captain." Jake didn't answer. He just turned to the girl. "Come on," he said softly. She followed him instantly. The ride back to Jake's small apartment was painfully quiet. Liria sat with her hands folded neatly on her lap, posture rigid, eyes fixed on nothing, like she was waiting for a command that wouldn't come. Jake kept glancing at her, unsure of what he was supposed to say to someone who had been taken from her world and dropped into his life like some kind of twisted gift basket. When they arrived, Jake pushed open the door to his old, untouched apartment. Everything smelled faintly of dust and memories. One bedroom, small kitchen, a couch that had seen better years. Liria stepped inside without a word, standing near the door like she wasn't allowed to move. "You can look around," Jake said. "You're not a prisoner." She didn't move. Jake rubbed the back of his neck, feeling 15 kinds of uncomfortable. "The bedroom's yours. I'll take the couch." That made her look up, just slightly, just enough that he could see the confusion flicker through her dark eyes. "Where?" she asked softly. "Will you use me?" Jake felt his heart drop like a stone. "What use?" she repeated, voice flat, emotionless. "For labor. For pleasure. For service. That is my function. You must tell me where." His throat went tight. "I'm not going to use you," he said, fighting the heat rising in his face. Not anger at her, but at the entire system that made her talk like that. "You're not property." She blinked fast, as if processing something impossible. "I don't understand," she whispered. "If I'm not property, what am I?" Jake sat down heavily. The real exhaustion of war settled across his shoulders. "I don't know yet," he said. "But you're free to eat when you want. Sleep where you want. Do what you want. I'm not giving you orders." Liria shook her head, trembling. "If I do not have orders, I do not know what to do." It was like watching someone fall apart silently, without tears, without noise, just a cracking from the inside out. Jake stood and opened the fridge, grabbing whatever he could find. "First step, eat, rest. We'll figure the rest out later." She hesitated, then followed his gesture toward the kitchen like she was learning gravity for the first time. But before she entered the bedroom, she turned back. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you being kind? What do you want?" Jake met her eyes. "I don't want anything from you," he said simply. That confused her more than anything else. She slipped into the bedroom and locked the door instantly. Jake heard the faint click of the lock and felt something heavy settle in his chest. He sank onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. 5 years of combat, loss, and nightmares. Yet somehow this moment hurt more than any battle he'd fought. Because this wasn't war. This was the aftermath. And sometimes the aftermath was worse. He pulled out his old tablet and began searching. Anything about Velcari. About Critian obedience implants. About ways to undo what had been done. There had to be answers somewhere. There had to be a way to help her. And for the first time since the ceasefire, Jake felt fear. Not for himself, but for the girl sleeping behind a locked door who had forgotten what it meant to be alive. Because something told him this wouldn't end with just one alien girl. This was only the beginning, and whatever was coming next was far bigger than either of them. The morning of the implant removal felt unreal, like the universe had hit pause just to watch what would happen. Jake stood beside Liria in the sterile hallway of the Coalition medical facility, his hands shoved deep in his pockets to hide how tense he felt. Liria, in contrast, looked almost calm. Almost. The only giveaway was the way her fingers kept curling and uncurling, like she was trying to remember what her hands were supposed to do when they weren't bound by someone else's commands. Ben Carter, the engineer turned medical tech, stepped out of the operating room. "All right," he said gently. "It's time." Liria looked up at Jake. For the first time since he met her, her eyes weren't empty, they were afraid. "Will I still be me?" she whispered. Jake swallowed hard. "Yes," he said. "Just more you than you've ever been." Something in that answer seemed to steady her. She nodded once, took a breath, and followed Ben into the operating room. The door slid shut, and Jake began the longest wait of his life. 9 hours later, Ben emerged, pale and exhausted, rubbing the back of his neck. "She's alive," he said, "and free." Jake didn't realize he'd been holding his breath until his vision blurred. When he finally saw her, bandaged and pale, but breathing on her own, it felt like looking at someone waking from a dream they never agreed to have. Her eyes fluttered open. "It hurts," she whispered. "I know," Jake said, "but you're free now." One tear slipped from the corner of her eye. "I'm scared. You're allowed to be." The days that followed were messy in ways Jake wasn't prepared for. Liria cried for no reason, sometimes out of pain, sometimes out of confusion, and sometimes out of a feeling she didn't have a word for yet. She laughed once, just once, when a cooking show host tried to flip a pancake and sent it flying across the room. She clapped her hand over her mouth in shock, as if laughter were something dangerous. She got angry at things that didn't matter and apologized for things she didn't need to. Every emotion was new, raw, unfiltered. "This is normal," Jake told her one night when she slammed the refrigerator door too hard and then immediately panicked. "You're allowed to feel things." "I wasn't before," she said quietly. "Now everything is loud. Inside my head." "That's what being a person is," Jake said. "It's loud inside all of us." She thought about that for a long time. As the weeks passed, Liria's strength returned, and so did something else. Curiosity, identity, memories. She started speaking with other Velcari, ones Jake hadn't known existed in the city. Many still had implants. Many didn't know freedom was even possible. Liria taught them small things first. How to make choices, how to express opinions, how to say no without fear. "You're good at this," Jake said one evening after watching her comfort a trembling younger Velcari named Zara. Liria shook her head. "I'm just remembering. My mother, she was a healer. Before the Critians took us." Jake smiled. Looks like her gift didn't die. But then the truth came crashing in. The implants weren't just obedience devices. They were recording devices. Spying on Jake. Spying on the Coalition. Spying on everything. When Liria realized this, she went pale, the kind of pale that had nothing to do with blue skin and everything to do with old terror waking up. "They used us," she whispered. "We were listening posts. Weapons. And the worst part? There are thousands of Velcari still out there. Still implanted. Still transmitting data. Still under Critian control. The war wasn't over. It had only changed shape." Coalition security exploded into crisis mode. Admiral Brennan, the kind of woman who had steel instead of bones, listened to Jake's report with a jaw so tight it looked carved. "This is a coordinated operation," she said. "The hardliner faction inside the Critian government is preparing a second strike." Jake felt Liria's hand twitch beside him, her fear silent but sharp enough to taste. "They're going to activate the implants," Liria said softly. "All of them. At once." "What happens then?" Brennan asked. Liria didn't blink. "Assassins." The room went quiet. Brennan moved instantly. "We remove every implant we can. Morrison, you're with me. Liria, you might be the only one who can convince your people to come involuntarily. This might get very bad very quickly." It did. 3 days later, chaos erupted across 5 planets. Some Velcari fought the programming. Some didn't. Some died trying. Some protected their human families with a fierce desperation that broke Jake's heart. Coalition forces scrambled. Medical teams worked around the clock. Ben, Kira, an elder Velcari who remembered life before slavery, and any doctor they could train began removing implants faster than anyone believed possible. And Liria? Liria stepped into a role she never asked for. A leader. She spoke to frightened Velcari in their own language, calming them, guiding them. She coordinated rescues. She risked her life in burning buildings and collapsing facilities. Jake watched her transform, not into a warrior, but into something more powerful, a symbol. Hope. It all came to a violent peak one night when Critian soldiers attempted to overrun the medical center where new freed Velcari were recovering. Jake fought alongside security forces, but it was Liria who stunned everyone. She moved like someone remembering an old dance. A warrior's dance. She fought with precision and fury, protecting the patients Ben had sworn to keep alive. Afterwards, she looked down at her shaking hands. "I didn't know I could do that," she whispered. Jake placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your implant didn't make you strong. It tried to cage you. This is who you've always been." The Critian coup collapsed after 4 days. Hardliners were arrested. The secret network exposed. The galaxy exhaled but didn't relax. Because the truth was out now. The Velcari had been the first enslaved species, but not the last. And Jake knew exactly what he had to do. The Coalition formed a liberation task force. Jake was chosen to lead it. Liria joined the Velcari Restoration Council. Together, they shaped a new future, one painful step at a time. Months later, Jake visited the reborn Velcari colony. New houses, new gardens, children laughing, old songs being sung again under alien skies. Liria stood at the center, raising a new flag, a silver tree with branches reaching for the stars. "We are no longer property," she said to the gathered crowd. "We are people, and we will help free others the way we were freed." Jake felt something warm settle in his chest. Pride, awe, hope. She turned to him. "You started this," she said. "No," Jake replied. "You did. I just helped you take the first step." Liria smiled, the kind of smile that belonged to someone who had fought through darkness and finally found the horizon. "Then let's take the next one together." Jake nodded. Together, and under the rising stars, a new era began, one built not by conquerors, but by the people who had once been kept silent. People who had finally learned to choose. People who refused to be forgotten again. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but freedom had just found its spark, and it was only going to burn brighter.